Okay, so welcome everyone to the next in the HIIT Workout series. This is the scaled innovation model. And this week we'll be going through in a short period of time the approach of a typical innovation journey. We will be recording this session and it will be made available on the YouTube channel, and a notification will go up thereafter. So let's get going. A quick introduction to myself. I'm Paul Innes. I run Intensive Marketing. We work with, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, left to right, we work with corporates in their product innovation teams. We also work with startups from early stage to scaling. And the bridge there is the Bridge of Size in Oxford. And I coach and mentor entrepreneurs at Oxford University's Innovation Incubator. Finally, the caring image on the right-hand side is I also act as a board trustee for a charity that supports the elderly with a rare brain condition. And if you're wondering what that is, Google PSPA and have a look. So what are we going to cover in the next 15 minutes? Well, we're going to cover the scaled innovation model, what it is, how to use it, when to use it, and to apply an example to that. I'll also touch on something that I use, which is market product organizational fit, and that helps with defining innovation strategy and learning on the journeys you go through. We'll then return back to the scaled innovation model as per normal, and we'll reconstruct it with a real life example that hopefully we can all understand and make sense of. And then, as always, at the end, our cool down after this workout will be your questions and answers if you want to stay on. If not, then obviously you can get back to your day. So getting straight into the model itself, or the framework. Here it is, it's scaled innovation model. So there's quite a bit going on in this model, but it's quite simple, and I'll just explain this. So firstly, we developed this whilst I was running Lab 59, which was a corporate innovation lab. We were looking to kind of reinvent the future of automotive retail. And so we were bringing out lots of innovations as we were going through. I apply this model now with pretty much every corporate innovation partner I work with, and pretty much all the startups and the coaching and mentoring I do. In fact, only last week we used it with a spin out from the university who are looking to disrupt the future of global label security. So why use it? So the reality is that innovation, as it says, is a learning journey. Your investors, all the people leading your organization or making the decisions, need to believe in your big vision, which we'll come to in a moment. They also need to believe in you and need to know that you're asking the right questions of the market at the right time. And so this is a neat model to use to show your journey and or structure your thinking. It can be just useful to work with your teams to think about the journey that lies ahead. And of course, it's a scale-up model. So as you're going through, the market product organizational fit bubbles, which is what MPO stands for, are growing as you learn and hopefully earn. I'll go into that a bit more shortly. Equally, as you go through this journey, you will be getting more investment, or you'll be asking for more funding. And so it's a neat tool to help, like I say, structure your thoughts or take your investors on the journey with you. So let me just evolve that a little bit. And that was quite a simplified model, but no innovation journey is typical. And I know there are founders on this call that will confirm that fact. The reality is that your journey is more a journey of discovery. And so it will take a different shape. There will not be a predictable path that you can take. So equally, The timeline is quite important as well, because as you can see there, the scaled investment that goes along, the length of that journey, whilst it will not be, it's not a project plan, it's not got a deadline or a milestone, there will be some indication to the people that are backing you, either in your organization or with investor funds, as to what point in time your big vision might be realized. But as we'll see in a moment, there are steps along the way to do that. So the other aspect, of course, is the roots unknown. And the key thing about being a founder is being able to show that you can understand the signals and read the market, as opposed to necessarily follow a route map, because nobody's going to give you that if you are the leader or the founder of this innovation. There are a number of points on this journey as well, and they're usual points, but I'll kind of bring them to life a little bit. So point number one is push on. Typically, you may have bootstrapped your idea or got some room from your leadership team to go and try something or validate a hypothesis. But you've probably got to a stage where you go, do you know what? You've made some discoveries. You've not validated everything, but it's worth pushing on. I'm going to go and get some seed funding. At the point you do, you're probably going to give up some equity. So it's a critical stage to understand whether you truly understand that market pain point, and whether you think you can solve that pain point. Again, more on that a bit later. And then we get to the next stage, which is kind of a pause stage. And you'll often see this, particularly in a startup world, where they're burning their seed funding and they're discovering certain things. Maybe that the tech stack just doesn't stack up. Sorry about that. That customers don't love the product the way that they love their product. It's often a situation. Or that talent is really, really hard to attract and keep. And you've got, you know, a bench of CTO wannabes. And of course, then you'll pitch proof points, which you're going to go and ask for more funding, Series A, or more investment from your board. Well, they're a little bit flaky. So often at this point, you know, people are pausing and just needing to go back to first principles and validate that those hypotheses are correct. And then, of course, no startup journey is complete without there being a pivot, of course. Now, pivot is not a bad thing. Pivot can be a good thing. So let me give you a good example of a good pivots. Slack, for example, is a good pivot. By understanding the market, they realized it was evolving and turned from being a gaming comms tool into a workflow platform. Pretty successful company. Steam is another good example. They pivoted, as we shared in a previous episode, from being a payment system within a game to a payments platform for the gaming industry. And then, of course, Instagram is a classic one, where actually they took functions and features out of their early product and made it focused on photos, and then they got the scale or the uptick, as the diagram shows. However, not all pivots get an uptick, and not all pivots get you what you want in terms of your journey. There is often another phase where B is replaced with purchase. So a couple of options here. If you are in a corporate, you may realize that, do you know what? Whilst we want to innovate and do this ourselves, there's some smart people out there already doing it with the tech, the talent, etc., etc. And maybe we should tuck them into our business. Equally, it may get to a stage where, as a startup, you go, we've only got this so far. We really don't have the capabilities, the capacity, desire even to carry on, and you'll look for an exit. And there's a really good example of this, which is eBay. So eBay used PayPal back in the early days, and PayPal was growing really, really well. eBay, being jealous, thought, well, we can do this. It's a payment system. Joined forces with a bank. Actually, they realized that they couldn't do it and ended up buying PayPal in the end, which gave birth to Elon Musk. And I'll leave it to you whether that's a good or a bad thing for the world. Okay, let's keep going about this innovation journey. And I really want to talk about two things: about being bold, being honest, being believable. And this model can help you. So just to put this into context of what's going to be going on here, in order to progress, you're going to need funding. to do that, you're going to need to be able to show the big vision. And so the other thing you need to be able to do here is answer these questions for the people that are going to be giving their money, that the problem is big enough to solve, that you're not just incrementing something that's already been solved, that's out there. That's not really going to be exciting. It's not really going to be differential. The other key thing that they're going to want to know is that it really hurts, or it will hurt. Sometimes your vision may be about something that's going to be happening in future. Good example of that would be something like Uber. You know, when they pitched, only 4% of cars are utilized in a given day, 4% of the time, sorry. And what they predicted is that it's unsustainable for lots of climate, congestion, cost reasons, and that the sharing process needs to go on. And so they disrupted the mobility industry. They weren't just another taxi provider. Equally, it's about you, whether you can crack the nut, because I need to believe in you. And fundamentally, at the point that you start, you've got nothing. You've just got yourself, your hypothesis, your belief, and they need to believe in you. And it's at that point that they're going to say, I think this person can turn 1x into 10x. Now, it's all very well having a big vision, having very bold statements, but the reality is you need to create a pathway of confidence for the people that are going to back you. And so this is the other key thing, which is about the believable aspect. And it's about the unknowns, because this is a learning journey of market, product, and organizational fit. And if you are solving a problem that no one else has contemplated or thought about, then it's very clear that you're not going to have all of the answers. But what you're doing at this stage is setting out a market opportunity and the things you need to discover and validate. That it really hurts the way you think it hurts in terms of the customer pain points. That equally, it hurts so much that somebody's willing to pay to remove the pain or do something different. One of the biggest challenges on your innovation journey will be apathy, changing what's already done today to do something different. A really great example of this is and it's very topical right now, is in the medical technology industry. You may have the best medtech device going, but the implementation challenge of changing processes on clinical wards in variable hospital or medical establishments around the world is really, really tough. So whilst it may be a great technological solution, actually the implementation is a real challenge. And that comes into ability to execute. And all of this comes into hypothesis testing, which is at that very early stage, and throughout your journey, you'll have a set of hypotheses that you need to validate. Okay, let's keep going at speed. So I talked about an evolving strategy, and an evolving strategy is your market, your product, and your organizational fit. And the reason I start with market and not product is quite simple. You need to work out the why first, be outside in. And that's going to help you determine where to play. Kind of touches on the market segmentation stuff we talked about in a previous episode, which we're going to cover in the next one. Secondly, it's what it is, how you're going to win. You know, how are you going to differentiate yourself? What makes you different? What is it that in your innovation that is going to put walls around your business so that nobody else can copy? And then finally, what you need. It's interesting that the two reasons startups fail, or two most popular reasons a startup will fail or an innovation will fail, is that the market problem wasn't understood properly or solved, and that's where to play a market. Or secondly, that the startup or team doesn't have the talent and skills to go and execute. Yet it's quite interesting, in product innovation and startup innovation, everybody focuses on the what first, and that's why market goes before product. So, as always, understand that this model is part of a broader theme. What informs it? Obviously, gut feel, hunches, technology, innovation, how things are changing. What doesn't inform it is a spreadsheet. At this stage, it's about the story. It's about what you don't know, but what you think. It's about what you're going to find out and what that's going to lead you to. And then that's going to blend into how you pitch. It's going to blend in how you think about getting your funding and at what time, where you make investments in product once you've got that funding and the customers you want to go serve. And of course, what you need to add into your organization or your team as you go on that journey. Okay, so that's kind of how it fits into. Always, it's in the middle of other things. So let's finish off the workout with a reconstruction of the scaled innovation model, and we're going to use Google+. So many of you probably know this story, but just to apply it and bring this model to life, let me do that for you. So back in the day, 2011, that's nearly 10 years, amazing. There was a shift in a growth of social networks, otherwise known as Facebook. So Google had to respond to that. And so Google at this time brought out Google+. And I think from memory, it was on an invitation only process. Somebody please correct me on chat if I've got that wrong. And so they built out Google+, and they had some hypotheses at that time that it was addressing some unmet needs. There were things that Facebook didn't do that Google+ was going to do. Now, I would argue that they were focused on product and not market. Because when you think about things like circles and some of the other things in Google+ at that time, actually, they weren't really hitting the mark. They weren't really getting the take-up that they were wanting. So they were at this kind of pause level. What do they do? And it's quite interesting because if you go through, they pushed on with Google+. Clearly, they had to respond to Facebook. They got to circles. They're realizing they're not getting the take-up or the validating the market opportunity they probably presented to Larry and Sergey in a board meeting, or probably a water cooler chat, knowing Google. And then they pivoted. Within Google+, there were a number of things. And one of those cool things was Hangout. And then they've added some Google phone in. And so they pivoted and those things started to get some traction. And today, where we end up is something called Google Meet. And this is a really good example of how the market moves and changes on your innovation journey. At the start, Google Plus was probably a social proposition. And at the end, it's now a communication proposition. And you only need to look at what we're doing right now, which is sharing a Zoom call. You only need to look at what Microsoft are doing right now, which is advertising Teams to death on every TV channel available, and see where that is evolving and all the other players that are coming into that market. So that's an example of that journey. Now, you're not going to be able to predict that journey, but you need to accept that you will go on it and you will use this model to kind of track your progress and project where you might end up based on certain hypotheses, which is the discovery you'll go through. So that's a scaled innovation model. Just a quick shout out. Next week, we're going to do segmentation cubes. If you would like to talk further on this, please do reach out to me. Talk about applying these to your business or your contexts. I do this all the time. And of course, you can see a full range of services there as well. Last thing, if I could ask you to do something before we open up some questions, is whether you do it right now or afterwards, on menti.com, there's a new survey. It's literally 2 minutes. I ask you what worked, what could be better, and some ideas and models and themes for future workouts. Really great feedback last week. It's really valuable. So people want to understand about lifetime value. We're going to cover that in future episode. They want to understand about the lean canvas. I'm going to unpack that in a future episode. And also people want to understand about value propositions. And I will also cover that as well. Same format, same time, same day. Okay, that's it for the workout. Anybody who wants to stretch off and cool down and take questions with me, I will do so in just a moment. Thank you. Okay, there was a deliberate pause there so that I could use that to cut out the recording from the Q&A, but I'll keep the recording going. Pretty much open the lines now. If anybody's got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them, love to take them, and hopefully share some more value if people have the time. If not, you need to head off for your coffee, equally, that's fine. I understand. It was a 15-minute session. Hopefully, I've pretty much kept to that, based on a few little late arrivals.
Morning, Paul. It's Katherine Parsons here. How are you?
I'm very well, Katherine. Great to hear your voice again.
I've got a quick question for you. I come from a background where people are very motivated by a passion for an idea, and it's interesting to me when you talk about Google Plus changing into Google Meet. I mean, do you think that sometimes founders can be resistant to changing an idea because it's something that they believe in personally very strongly, and then that can inhibit the business growing?
Yes, absolutely. So let me just respond to that on a couple of levels. So yes, I agree. I'm going to answer that in two ways. Firstly, I always talk about market product fit, and I also talk about market first. And I'm very often, what I would say as part of that, and I'm going to slightly contradict myself, is there are many situations where the product and the technology has led a fantastic journey. It's just that in principle, if you start with the tech and the how, you're thinking about yourself and not the problem you're solving, which in most cases isn't the best route, and in most cases is not what's going to excite an investor. However, about Google Plus and Google Meets, it is interesting. You'll often see what I call a theme, which is the theme for me is sunk cost mentality. You know, when I talked about pause, that pause stage, if I was to go back to it, pre-seed A funding or whatever else, often people are not willing to let go what started the organization or what started it. And not being able to pivot is a really hard thing to do, because pivot in a way is an acceptance that the world is different to the way you saw it when you started. And if you are the prime person in that startup, that can be, you have to show both vulnerability and maturity in your leadership to be able to do that. Now that can work a lot easier in a startup than it can do in a corporate environment. And often if you see a corporate environment where you see an innovation in corporates, that's even more rare, where people show that vulnerability and that maturity. The other thing as well is, it's not uncommon, Katherine, that as you go through this journey, some of the founders and the leaders end up being swapped out. So I talked about the purchase stage. Sometimes it's not so much a purchase, it may well be a change of the key leadership. So I work with one of the big venture firms Vest in Oxford, and one of their challenges as they guide startups on their journey is recognizing the talent to not just bring it to market, but to get it to scale. And sometimes they're different people, and it's nothing about the individual. It's just a different set of skills. What gets you 0 to 60 is different from 60 to 100. Sorry, long answer, but hopefully that was valuable.
No, it's interesting, yes, and reconfirms my observations from, my professional experience. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So any other questions? I know some people got to run off, not an issue, I get that. But if there are any other questions or comments, or absolutely take them. Equally, I'll shut down when we've done, and I'll put the recording up for the main workout.
Hi Paul, it's Tom.
Hey Tom.
Yeah, so I love that model, obviously, when we've been through that before. One thing that I've found recently is that there is a balance between getting in the market, and I think your example with Google shows that. Actually getting out there once you've done some of that early validation, and even putting a product out that is similar to a competitor, just to learn from it. I didn't know if you had any comments or feedback on that that balance between getting out there and having something tangible to show people.
Actually, it's a great example, and I think it is that. I think the word you use there of balance is an absolutely critical word, and it kind of links to kind of links to Catherine's comment as well, which is you're not going to learn anything unless you actually test it with the marketplace, and you're not going to, no plan survives the first contact with a customer. So absolutely getting something out there, getting either a prototype, an MVP is absolutely vital, because you're going to learn so much from that. And there is that old saying that you should be embarrassed by your first product. And that's the point you need to go on. You are going to learn through actually what's going wrong rather than what's going right. Again, different techniques around innovation, around tangent. I'll cover this on another session, maybe design sprints, which is, getting in front of 5 people is going to get you a very strong early indicator as to what's likely to work. But more important is what's not likely to work. And I think even if that's copying a competitor, that's okay, because what you'll learn, I think, through that, Tom, is that actually you've copied a competitor, but the competitor is maybe believing in their product too much and not picking up the signals that of the 5 functions, only 2 are really worth it. Because as a startup, you don't want to be backing 5 functions with your limited cash if only 2 really matter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's all I was saying, is that sometimes you've got to be playing in the same space so that you're getting connections and contacts and getting to those users. Because just doing market research and just interviewing and stuff like that, even with a prototype, is not quite the same as validating with Google Ads with real customers.
Absolutely. And in fact, Google are the classic company that do this. And I probably showed them in a slightly negative light there, but in reality, Google has grown through exactly that. They put stuff out there and they got the data and they tested. And everything in Google, if you've ever read a number of good books, one called Into the Plex, which is very, very good, talks about their mindset, which is a data-driven mindset, which they test and fail and test and fail, and the data will prove you in the end. And their data is hypothesis, because they're scientists at the end of the day, Larry and Sergey. And I have an experiment. This is my hypothesis. What was the result of the experiment? Now move on.
Cool, thanks.
No, great question. So we have a few more still on the line. Anybody else got other questions, or shall I shut down, get to our Friday morning coffee, maybe our second or third? And next week, by the way, just a reminder, is the segmentation cubes, where I respond to a request in last week's episode to unpack how you break down a market and what a market looks like. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'll leave you to your Friday. Thank you for giving up your time. Thank you for the chats. Thank you for the questions. And we'll see you again next week. All right. Take care. Stay safe.